In media, there comes a time when the main characters are often paired alongside another individual, whether they be an ally or at least someone who isn't outright villainous towards them. The job of this strawman character, even when working alongside the protagonist towards the same end goal, is to stand against the main character's methods and actions. As the main protagonists are what the audience are supposed to be attached to, we are expected to see their views and methods as the correct response to the situation at hand, with the strawman character being in the wrong because their opinion is supposed to be wrong. But you see, sometimes the writers are so insistent that the main characters are just right that they make the characters make surface level arguments without really putting any thought or effort into it, with the story attempting to make their views the correct ones anyways. Because of this, when you have the strawman character make points that stand against the main character's views and methods, the writers have done such a poor job explaining why the main characters are supposed to be right that what was supposed to be a strawman character making wrong points actually stands out as a more sympathetic and likeable one than the main characters. This is the sympathetic strawman, or as Mr. Bug on Twitter put it, the John Walker effect, with his post inspiring me to make this video. Now, when I first watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I already saw that John Walker was better than the rest of the main characters, but at the time I thought he was just a one-off event, just the writers being bad at their jobs, and that this thing doesn't usually happen. But the more I looked into different more popular media pieces, the more I realised just how many times this happens. Before we get onto those examples, let me explain why the sympathetic strawman applies so heavily to John Walker. Throughout the story, John Walker is treated by both the characters and the story as a phony who can't get the job done and is trying to take the mantle that Steve Rogers built. He's constantly brushed off by Bucky and Sam, most of the time he fails to make an impact, and he's constantly shown to be less effective than Sam, who's treated as someone who should rightfully bear the shield. Then he's shown taking the super soldier serum, and the story tries to frame him as someone desperately trying to be like Steve. And when he kills a terrorist leader later on, the show treats him like a rabid beast that killed an unarmed individual. The two main characters then beat him down, showing that he is indeed inferior to them, and then he's stripped of his rank and publicly humiliated by his superiors. It's only towards the end of the show, when he's shown abandoning the shield and following Sam and Bucky's orders, that they stop trying to treat him as a joke, now that the true Captain America is here. That's how the story wants you to see his character. Unfortunately, the writers did a terrible job, and I have the magic power of common sense, so that's not how I saw this character at all. Steve Rogers was an iconic hero to the world, but he started as a soldier and a symbolic representation of the US, so it makes perfect sense that they would try and reclaim that title. They then proceed to pick John Walker to take on the mantle, and he's been shown having great hesitation over doing so, feeling that he wouldn't be able to live up to the ideals that Steve had or be a good representation of Captain America. But he chooses to do so because if he doesn't, someone else will. So he takes on this mantle and, despite fighting super soldiers, he and Lamar still try and assist Bucky and Sam as best as they can, with Walker even being the last man standing in the truck fight scene. When meeting Bucky and Sam on the road, he offers them a ride, assures them that he's not trying to be better than Steve, and that he's just trying to do the right thing, which would be easier if they worked as a team. He attempts to talk to them and get them to work with him to take on the Flag Smashers several times, but all they do is either insult them or talk down to them. Sam and Bucky eventually decide not to help them and get out of the car to walk several miles to get to the airport, costing them a great deal of time and effort because of the horrific crime of giving Lamar a nickname.
I'm Battlestar, John Spartan.
Battlestar? Stop the car!
Because it's not like any other major representational figures in this universe have nicknames or code names. Later on, Bucky is arrested because he missed one of his therapy sessions, which he has to go to by law. And who comes to help him out in that situation? Walker and Lamar, who help him get out of jail. Later, they once again ask the main duo to come and help them out, and after they once again refuse to help, seemingly for the fact that they just don't like Walker, Walker tells them to stay out of their way if they're not going to assist them, which he has the right to do so. He has official orders from the government to try and track down the Flag Smashers. So if the duo are just going to get in the way or do something that's against the best interests of the governments they represent, then it's probably best that they just don't come along. And on top of that, this episode ends with the duo visiting Zemo, a known terrorist and murderer, and later breaking him out of prison, further souring their relationship with Walker and the government. Later on, Walker meets the group at a memorial held for one of the Flag Smashers, and instead of immediately arresting them for breaking a known terrorist out of prison, Walker still wants to work with them. And why is Walker presented as the wrong in this situation? because he wants to walk in during a funeral and arrest them instead of trying to talk them down. Please remember that these are a group of unstable people with super soldier serum who have committed a number of terrorist acts and killed plenty of people. On top of that, you have a pretty sizable chunk of the group confined in the building, so they cannot just escape anywhere and there's no civilians nearby to endanger. This situation with a coordinated attack could pretty much end things right now, but Sam and Bucky would rather risk them getting away and doing more terrorist acts because it would be mean to interrupt a funeral. And what happens? The rest of the Flag Smashers run away, Carly refuses to surrender, and when Walker tries to arrest her, she gets away, because the rest of the group was waiting on Sam's plan to work, with Zemo being the only person who manages to do something, and again, that's because he's not really listening to Sam's orders either. Later, the Dora Milaje, members of the Wakandan military, come to take Zemo away for killing their king, and while they're right to want Zemo put away, they are not acting on any authority besides that of Wakanda, which is not part of any government body like NATO. And Sam and Bucky are not supposed to be working on this and should be wanted criminals for breaking Zemo out. So, who is the recognised authority in the government's eyes in this situation? Walker is. And what does he try to do? Defuse the situation and talk to the Wakandans. What do? Immediately try and maim, even kill the rest of the group, and they only stop because Zemo manages to escape and they lose interest in them. And throughout this fight, it's treated as being Walker's fault, and he is humiliated for trying to settle things in a peaceful manner instead of using violence first. Later, Walker and Lamar have a talk about using a super soldier serum that Walker managed to smuggle with him, and Lamar points out that he would be able to save a lot more lives if he had that power, and he's always trying to make the right call. And Lamar is right. The next time we see him, Walker is more than capable of using his new powers and his military experience to take down a large group of Flag Smashers alongside Bucky and Sam. And then, Lamar dies and we get that scene. Now, many people try and use this scene as an allegory for abuse the members of authority like the military or the police inflict on those that don't have the same authority, but that doesn't work for me for two reasons. Reason number one, these are not innocent people, or some low-time thugs that stole a purse. These people have gone across the world, blowing up public buildings, killing innocent people, and trying to cause as much disruption as possible to society. On top of this, for Walker, they had just killed his best friend when he basically wasn't a threat to them, especially compared to him or Bucky. So Walker, in his grief, combined with the fact that this terrorist refused to surrender until he physically couldn't do anything else, kills him. And I'm expected to feel sorry for this guy? No, it doesn't work like that. And that brings me on to reason number two. Why do people act like this is Walker killing someone who's unarmed? Again, considering the fact that he didn't surrender until he didn't have a choice, this is a super soldier. We all saw what Steve and Bucky can do throughout the MCU. They can smash through walls, rip doors off their hinges, hold a helicopter in place, throw people around like ragdolls, and as we saw with Lamar's death, can literally kill people with a single punch. How can you possibly claim that someone is unarmed when they're literally a walking weapon? What's to stop him from breaking out when he has the chance to do so and continuing to help Carly? Which is exactly what he would do, because as we've already discussed, he is surrendering because he has literally no other choice, not because he stopped because he felt guilty. So yeah, I'm not going to say that Walker made the best decision in the world, but he definitely isn't some villain for doing what he did. How many times did Steve kill people in the MCU who never had a chance against him? How many times did he offer surrender? So Walker, who has just lost his friend and is suffering deep psychological trauma, is then attacked by Sam and Bucky for what he did. And it's never pointed out that had Sam and Bucky just helped him when he asked, the Flag Smashers would have been arrested a long time ago and Lamar would still be alive. But if we did that, this scene wouldn't be good, so we don't have time or the common sense for that to happen. The duo just beat on him for the shield that Sam doesn't even want and leave him, broken and bleeding on the factory floor. Walker is then dragged back to the US in front of a hearing discussion for his actions. Walker, once again, is humiliated in front of the press and stripped of his rank as Captain America, with all the blame landing square at his feet. This is despite the fact that he was dealing with super soldier terrorists, had Sam and Bucky constantly interfering with his operations, and the fact that the government thrusted him into the role of Captain America when he wasn't even sure he wanted to do it. He gets blamed for everything, and by the way that it's written, we're supposed to agree with the writing that it's his fault, despite the fact that it obviously isn't. And despite all of this, despite everything that's happened to him, what's the first thing he does when he has the chance? He goes to Lamar's family, talks to his parents, and says how sorry he is that he couldn't protect Lamar. He still puts all the blame on himself, and they make sure that they are his primary concern. And some people say that he tries to shrug off blame by telling them that this man killed Lamar when it was actually Carly. And yes, literally, that isn't true, it was Carly. But figuratively, this group of people is responsible for Lamar's death. They were the reason why he and Walker were deployed in the first place, and this man assisted Carly in killing him. So figuratively, he is telling the truth. This man does have a responsibility in Lamar's death. Again, I'm not saying that executing him was 100% correct, but the man was dangerous and far from innocent in anything that happened. Also, please remember that at no point is Sam and Bucky punished for freeing Zemo, by the way, they just sweep that under the rug. So finally, Walker still chooses to go out and fight the Flag Smashers, despite Lamar's death, despite his humiliation. He fights for as long as he can, and when he finally gets the chance to kill Carly, instead of choosing to fight the Flag Smashers and kill her, he instead chooses to save the innocent civilians that are trapped in the van. Without Walker's help and choices, Bucky and Sam would have failed and innocent people would be dead. But Walker shows up and decides to focus on saving the civilians over fighting the Flag Smashers, so that doesn't happen. As far as I'm concerned, this is the only time in the show when they don't try and paint him in an antagonistic light against Sam and Bucky. And it's designed that way because this is supposed to be his sort of redemption arc. But again, because of the way it's been written, this isn't a redemption arc in my eyes. This is Walker just doing what he's always tried to do throughout the show. Help the good guys, stop the bad guys, save the innocent people. And that, my friends, is why John Walker is such a good example of the sympathetic strawman. He's designed to be an example of how not to do things, and how he and the government are wrong compared to Sam and Bucky, but his actions are so understandable and the rest of the story is so poorly written that he comes across as the most likeable and sympathetic of the characters. Hell, he isn't even the only person in the show who gets hit with this trope. We all remember this scene, where Sam lectures the government officials that they need to do better for the refugees misplacing the snap.
You've got to do better, Senator.
That might sound reasonable, if not for the fact that 1. The officials tell Sam that this is a difficult situation and they are just trying to do the best with what they have. And Sam agrees with them.
But you have no idea how complicated this situation is.
You know what? You're right.
And number 2, you know what Sam's big plan is that's much better than what the officials have come up with? Do better. That is not a plan. That is literally nothing. That is just setting unreasonable standards for a situation that's completely out of anyone's depth. But remember, Sam's the protagonist, so we're supposed to agree with him that the government officials aren't doing what they can, despite the fact that they clearly are and it's a very difficult situation. So, what other pieces of media have some good examples of the sympathetic strawman? Well, let's take a look. In the X-Men comics, the mutants are usually used as an allegory for prejudice against minority groups, with people like Senator Kelly being seen as intolerant and spreading fear among the general populace. But this allegory has never really worked because some mutant powers are dangerous to society, and there's many times in the comics, such as with the Brotherhood of Mutants, where people use their powers to oppress regular people, which makes Senator Kelly come off as a less racist nutjob and more of a concerned individual who's sometimes overzealous in his efforts to keep people safe. And then we had Red Hood, aka Jason Todd in Batman Under the Red Hood. Throughout the film, Jason takes control of the crime families, sets up shop as a drug kingpin, and kills off other criminals that oppose him. We later learn he's doing all of this to manipulate Black Mask, a criminal rival, into releasing the Joker so that Jason can kidnap Joker. You see, Joker, being a mass murdering psychopath, killed Jason to taunt Batman, and has killed hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. After his death, Jason was resurrected and came back to enact his plan. Jason tries to force Batman to either kill the Joker himself, or he'll have to kill Jason to stop him from killing the Joker. The reason why he tries to make Batman do this? Because he can't understand why Batman has let Joker get away with slaughtering all these people and destroying so much of Gotham, especially considering that Jason himself died because Batman couldn't stop him. Gotham City is a corrupted mess, with the justice system constantly failing to do its job, and criminals easily escape from prison, failing to protect its citizens from people like the Joker. All that Jason asks is that Batman do what any other rational government would have done a long time ago, and that's kill Joker, and only kill Joker. Batman tries to say that killing Joker will only lead to him killing more people, but Jason questions why he would even do that. He's not asking Batman to kill petty thugs on the street, or even to kill other members of the Rogues Gallery, just Joker, who has proven time and time again that he is an uncontrollable Deathbringer. But Batman just says he can't do that and he wouldn't be able to control himself afterwards. And we're meant to agree with this, but Jason makes such a compelling case that it makes you unable to agree with Batman just shrugging the responsibility off. Batman responds the same way to Injustice Superman. In this continuity, Joker uses Scarecrow fear toxin to make Superman kill Lois Lane and his unborn child. When Lois's heart stops beating, it causes a nuke to detonate in Metropolis, killing millions of people. Superman, after experiencing all of this, decides to kill the Joker to stop him from ever doing something like this again. And Batman, as well as several others, respond as if he's a monster for doing this. Remember, I'm not talking about later in the story when he takes over the world, executes criminals and starts killing other heroes. Literally, at the start of the comic, all he wants to do is kill Joker, a mass murdering psychopath who just killed millions of people and his own personal family. And people treat him like he's some irredeemable monster, despite the fact that they never did anything to try and fix Gotham and Gotham's poor justice system, allowing him to keep doing whatever he wants in the first place. Let's move on from the comic book stuff and onto some other things, then we'll wrap things up. Throughout Fable 3, we are leading a revolution against your brother, Logan, in order to gain the throne and free Albion from his tyranny. After getting the throne, we are told that a force known as the Darkness is making its way to Albion, and that everything he did up to that point was to try and stop it. And then the game makes you make a series of choices, and they are listed as binary good or evil choices. And if you choose the evil choices, people compare your character to Logan. But some of the choices that will lead to the best future for Albion are regarded as evil despite the circumstances of the game. For instance, we are told we can either pay to send the children of Albion to school, or we can send them to work in factories. While sending them to work in a school would be morally right in a time of peace, sending them to work in the factories would boost the workforce that supplies the armies with weapons and armour, allowing you to fight back against the darkness more efficiently and save people. But if you pick this option, you're listed as evil. Another choice is whether to drain a lake and mine all of its resources. Now obviously, damaging nature and ripping up the land is a horrible decision to just make for money and profit. But when those resources are needed in order to stop the end of the world, I struggle to see how that makes me evil. But nope, the game will treat you that way. And all of these choices were the same sort of choices that Logan did. And everyone in that game constantly reminds you that Logan was a horrible person, despite the fact that most of the laws he imposed was for the benefit of the kingdom and saving people's lives. Now finally, we have one last case study, one that has always infuriated me, and that is Dawn from 28 Weeks Later. The story of the 28 Days Later universe is that in a lab, the Ebola and rabies virus was mixed together to create the Rage virus. This virus then escapes from a lab in the UK, where it begins to spread all across the United Kingdom. The virus turns the individual into a rage-filled killer whose only goal is to kill everything in sight that isn't infected. The first film, 28 Days Later, shows the UK 28 days after the virus was first unleashed, and most of the UK has been killed or infected, with maybe only a few thousand people left uninfected in the entirety of the United Kingdom. 28 Weeks Later focuses on the UK 28 weeks after the virus has been unleashed, and shows how the infection slowly starved to death and the US military slowly started to take over the UK and make it livable. The film follows Don, a primary character in the film, before focusing on his kids, the main protagonists of the film, and we see how they try and survive during the second infection caused by Don. However, before the main plot, at the start of the film, we get to see a small group of survivors when the virus was still knocking around, and these survivors are slowly picked off until there's only 4 remaining. Jacob, a survivor who ran to get his escape boat ready, Don, his wife Alice, and a young boy. During the opening, Don abandons Alice and the boy in order to survive, and later tells his children that their mum is dead and he watched her die. Later, it's discovered that Alice is immune and has survived, with the kids finding her in their old home. Don defends himself and insists that he had no choice, but the story heavily implies that he's a coward, and his children are extremely upset with him for what he did. Except that's obviously completely unfair on Don for so many reasons. In this story, if even a single drop of infected blood gets in your system, in about 30 seconds you become infected yourself. On top of that, these are fast sprinting, pain ignoring infected who want to kill things so badly that they forget to eat and slowly starve to death. During the start of the film, a good chunk of the survivors are killed off, either because they become infected or they're too old to fight back. Jacob quickly flees by himself, and so it's only one man, one woman, and a very young boy left to fight back the horde of infected in this house, who was slowly tearing through the house to get to them. Now, they don't have a lot of time to get out, and the child decides to hide in one of the bedrooms instead of running away with them, causing Alice to waste time looking for him while Don shuts the door and waits for her. The infected then burst through the door, with Dawn on one side of the room and Alice on the other. These infected immediately try and attack Dawn. In order for Dawn to save Alice, he would need to fight through the horde of infected to get to her room, somehow buy enough time to get the window open, and then manage to get everyone out of the house through the window. And by this time, the infected would have swarmed around the house, and Jacob most likely would have left with the boat, which would have killed them anyways. Could Dawn have gotten out through his window, gone around the house, and then helped open their window? Well, no, not unless he managed to waste time finding a ladder or something, and by that point, again, the infected would have swarmed the house. Alright, so he couldn't save his wife or the child, an action that still clearly haunts him, but why did he lie when he said that he was 100% certain that Alice was dead? Well, again, he didn't. You have to understand that even ahead of time, if Alice had been bitten and people knew that she was infected but wasn't showing any symptoms, that still wouldn't matter much for the key fact that that's not what these things are trying to do. Sometimes, because of the virus, the infected sometimes suffer from serious bleeding, usually vomiting, which can lead to infection. And sometimes they will try and bite people, especially when using their fists or their legs would be ineffective in causing pain. But most of the time, all the infected want to do is kill people. They aren't actively trying to infect people, just kill them. And if they get infected in the process, that's just an accidental advantage for them. So when Dawn sees Alice get dragged away from the window, he's not seeing her get dragged away to be infected. He's seeing Alice get dragged away from the window to be beaten to death. He has absolutely no reason whatsoever to believe that she found a way out of this. In fact, one of my criticisms for this film is that Alice somehow didn't die in the farmhouse because the horde is so huge, and she made so much noise there's no way she's escaping from that farmhouse alive. But the script and the two main characters treat Don like he's a horrible person, when actually he's right. What else could he do in that situation that isn't guaranteed suicide? So that, my friends, is what I call the Sympathetic Strawman. A strawman character in a piece of media that goes against the ideologies and views of the main characters and story that we're supposed to disagree with. But the writers, either through making their arguments too compelling or writing the script so poorly we can't support the main characters, actually make them seem more reasonable, understandable, and sympathetic in their actions. Thank you for watching my video, everyone. I hope you had a great day. Please consider liking and subscribing, checking out some more of my videos, and if you're feeling really generous, please consider checking out my Patreon. I also go on Twitter and Twitch sometimes, so please feel free to check me out there. But overall, I just hope you had a great day, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.